Ryan, 33. My name is Ryan. It wasn't always like this. Christmas used to be the one thing I looked forward to. I remember the smell of cinnamon drifting through the house, the cold air that made my cheeks sting, and the soft glow of Christmas lights twinkling like a promise of warmth. It wasn't about the presents or the food. It was about us, the family. For a few hours, it felt like everything was right with the world. Even in the chaos, even in the passive-aggressive jabs, the laughter, the mess, there was love. Or at least, that's how it used to feel. But then Mom passed away. It felt like everything shifted after that. The family started to unravel in ways I couldn't quite explain at first. I figured it was just grief, something that would eventually settle. But it didn't. It became clear, at least to me, that the loss wasn't what was tearing us apart. No, it was the spaces Mom left behind. There's a kind of silence that fills a room when someone who held it all together is gone. That silence, the one that everyone pretends they don't notice, starts to speak louder and louder. At first, it was subtle. A few awkward pauses in conversation, a couple of calls not returned. But as the years passed, it was no longer subtle. My sister Melanie, Aunt Dorene, hell, even Dad, they all began to move further and further away from me. No one said it outright, but I knew I wasn't part of the family anymore. I hadn't been around as much in the last couple of years. Life had changed. I had changed. I moved out of town for work, a small city just an hour away, but it might as well have been across the world to them. Melanie blamed me for not visiting enough. Aunt Dorene had always been on my case about how I thought I was better than them since I moved out. But last Christmas, I decided I'd try to bring it back to what it used to be, the way it was before everything fell apart. I even put in the effort to make it right. I went all out. I got my dad a crate of specialty beers, something I knew he'd drink straight through by Boxing Day. I mailed Emily, my sister, a pair of limited edition sneakers she'd been obsessing over on her TikTok. Thoughtful stuff, right? I wasn't expecting thanks or even recognition, just the warmth of family. I didn't need to be noticed, but a little warmth wouldn't hurt. I'd stayed up till 2 a.m. the night before baking homemade cookies, an old recipe Mom used to make. I even wore the red sweater that she loved. The one she used to joke made me look like I was ready for a Hallmark movie. It was supposed to be a peace offering, a gesture. I thought, maybe I haven't been here enough. But maybe, just maybe, Christmas will bring us back together. I pulled into the driveway just before 6, nerves just starting to settle in, a little hesitant but hopeful. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I made my way to the door, clutching that bottle of wine under my arm. The cookies balanced carefully on the tray. I rang the doorbell, expecting maybe a little warmth in return, something to show me that they still cared. I saw a flicker of movement behind the frosted glass, a shadow quickly darting away as if someone had peeked through the curtains and quickly decided against it. I knew they'd seen me. They knew I was there. The door swung open, and there stood Aunt Dorene, my least favorite family member, in all her glory. She wore her usual glittery reindeer sweater, a glass of wine in her hand, her expression one of complete disinterest. She didn't even try to hide her disdain. Her voice flat and sharp as she said, "Oh, you actually showed up." I managed a tight smile, forcing out a Merry Christmas. Aunt D, I tried to push past the awkwardness, but she blocked the doorway, looking over her shoulder like I was the stain on her perfect holiday. She sighed dramatically, eyes narrowing as if she had just discovered an annoying speck of dust. "We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday." I stared at her, momentarily stunned. My heart rate picked up. I didn't know how to respond. Her words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. And suddenly the warm Christmas I had imagined felt like a distant dream. "What did you say?" I managed to choke out. Aunt Dorene leaned in closer, her face an inch from mine. Her words came out like poison, each one sharper than the last. "This is a family gathering. You made it pretty clear the last few years that you're not part of this family anymore." I looked past her into the living room. There they were, my cousins, my uncles, even Dad, who was carving the turkey like everything was perfectly normal. Melanie, standing at the table with a smug smile, laughing with Uncle Joe. The golden warmth of the chandelier over the dining table made everything look so right. But it wasn't. No one had even looked up to see if I'd arrived. No one came to greet me. No one even acknowledged that I was standing there in the cold, holding a tray of cookies I'd stayed up all night baking. I blinked, but my words seemed to fail me. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. Just a short, breathless exhale. It was like everything I had felt for years about this family was suddenly laid bare. I didn't argue, didn't scream. I just turned around, stepped off the porch, and didn't look back. I could feel Aunt Dorene's eyes boring into my back as I made my way down the icy steps, the tray of cookies slipping slightly in my hands. The snow started falling in fat, wet flakes, the kind that melted instantly on the ground but still created a quiet, muffled world. I didn't run. I didn't slam the gate. I just walked back to my car. The hollow feeling in my chest wasn't anger, not yet. At least, it wasn't even sadness. It was just this weight, this crushing weight, like a door had slammed shut inside me and everything I thought I understood about family just evaporated. I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, and whispered to myself, "Got it." I started the engine, and as I drove away, my phone buzzed. First one call, then another. I ignored them all. Let them go to voicemail. The excuses, the apologies, the lies. It didn't matter. It didn't matter because nothing could erase that look on Aunt Dorene's face. Nothing could change the cold, cutting way she had dismissed me. Nothing could make me feel like I was ever really part of that family. As I drove away, I felt a strange, calm kind of clarity. Maybe it was the snow, or maybe it was the silence that filled the car. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even sad, I just felt empty. I didn't know how long I'd been driving, but eventually my phone buzzed again. 10 missed calls, mostly from my father. I didn't answer right away, just let them pile up in my inbox. But then, on the 10th call, I finally picked up. "Ryan," my dad said, his voice shaky, and I could hear shouting in the background. "Where are you?" "On my way home," I replied, my tone calm. I didn't know. I didn't know she said that to you. I'm coming to get you," he stammered. I could hear Melanie's voice in the background, muffled and distant. "Dad, just let it go." "No," he said, his voice suddenly firm. "I need to fix this. Ryan, just wait for me. Okay, don't leave." The line went silent for a few moments, and as I drove on, I saw headlights flicker in my rearview mirror. Someone was following me. The car swerved into the gas station parking lot beside me. It was my father. I didn't have to wait long before Dad's Subaru pulled into the parking lot next to mine. I watched him park, a little too fast, like he was trying to outrun something. Maybe himself. He was out of the car before it had even stopped completely. His jacket half-zipped, one glove on and the other clenched in his hand like it was the only thing keeping him from completely falling apart. His face looked older than I remembered, more tired, smaller, like he'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. The snow had started falling harder now, thick flakes clinging to the windshield, but I didn't turn on the wipers. There was something almost fitting about how everything seemed so still, so quiet. The world outside felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at him as he walked toward the car, his pace frantic, his breath coming out in heavy clouds. "Are you okay?" I asked when he stopped by the window. Still standing outside, I cracked it just enough to hear him, but not enough to feel the cold wind that was whipping through the parking lot. He nodded, but there was something in his eyes, a kind of panic I'd never seen in him before. It felt like he was looking through me, trying to find something he'd lost. But whatever it was, he didn't speak it out loud. Instead, he reached for the door handle and yanked it open. "Get out. We need to talk. Not through glass. Come on." I hesitated. Just for a second, it wasn't that I didn't want to hear what he had to say. It was more about what he might say. What had happened to the man who used to hold everything together? Where was the person who used to carve the turkey with a smile and tell us all that everything would be okay? But I didn't argue. I stepped out of the car, the wind cutting through my thin sweater, my breath coming out in sharp bursts. The snow melted on my skin, but the cold didn't seem to care. It didn't matter. I felt colder inside than the weather could ever make me feel. "I'm sorry," he started, his voice quiet but strained. I didn't know Dorene would do that. I swear." "Really?" I said, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. "You didn't know?" The words came out before I could stop them. You didn't know your own sister would treat me like that, like I was a problem to be erased. He flinched at my words, but I didn't apologize. Not this time. I was tired of apologizing for existing in their family. No, I didn't, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't meet my eyes. I didn't know until after you left. When Melanie told me, I didn't even know you were at the door until it was too late. I stared at him, this man who had been my father for 33 years, and I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. But it wasn't just disappointment, it was betrayal. And not just from Aunt Dorene, not just from Melanie. It was from him too. I had been waiting for him to step up, for him to protect me. But instead, he had let Dorene and Melanie run the show. He had allowed it to happen. And for what? To keep the peace, to avoid conflict. How many times had he stayed silent while they pushed me out? I shook my head, trying to shake off the anger, but it kept coming back like a tidal wave. You let them do this to me, Dad. You let them drive me out. And now you're telling me it's all going to change, that it's too far, too late. I should have stopped it, he murmured, his words a confession. I should have said something, done something. Yeah, you should have, I snapped, my voice cutting through the air, sharp and bitter. You should have been my father. He looked up then, finally meeting my eyes. There was something in his gaze, something raw and broken. I'm sorry. Ryan, I didn't protect you from it. But I can now. I need to make it right. I could feel the heat of my anger flaring again, but I forced it down. This wasn't about yelling, this was about something else. Something deeper. I needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. I watched as he fumbled with his coat pocket, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully, like it was something fragile, sacred even. He handed it to me, and my fingers trembled as I took it. My heart raced as I recognized the handwriting. It was my mother's. She wrote this before she died, Dad said, his voice breaking. She left it for you. She wanted you to have it. I didn't know about it until tonight. I stared at the letter in my hands, the weight of it almost too much to bear. It was folded neatly, the edges worn from time, and as I unfolded it, I saw her words, her real words, the ones I had never gotten to hear. It was everything I needed to hear. She had written that she was proud of me, that she knew how Dorene and Melanie treated me, how they made me feel small, that her last wish for us was for Dad and me to stay close, to never let them make me feel like a disappointment. And most importantly, she said I was not the failure they tried to make me believe I was. I didn't know how long I stood there, just staring at the letter, reading and rereading each word, letting the weight of it sink in. The snow had started to stick to the ground, the world outside turning silent, as if it understood that I had just been handed my mother's final gift. She knew, I whispered, my voice breaking. She knew everything, didn't she? Dad nodded, his voice thick with regret. She did. And Dorene knew it too. That's why she kept it from you. She didn't want you to see it. Why, I asked, my heart pounding, why would she do that? Dad didn't have an answer. Not really. He just looked down at his feet, the weight of his own guilt settling over him. Melanie had known too. She had been listening to Dorene, siding with her, letting her make decisions that should have been ours to make. I wasn't just left out, I was erased. And Melanie had let it happen. I clenched the paper in my fist, the words on it burning through me like fire. I'm done. I said quietly, I'm done being the outsider. I'm done letting you all push me away. Dad took a step forward, reaching out as if to stop me, but I pulled back, shaking my head. I don't need your excuses. Dad, I need the truth. All of it. He hesitated before finally nodding. I didn't stop it because I was weak. Because Dorene, she wormed her way into everything. She made me believe that I was the problem, that you were the problem. I let her do it. My chest tightened as I felt the anger rise again, but it wasn't at Dad anymore. It was at myself. At the years I spent believing their lies. At the time I wasted thinking that maybe things would just go back to normal. I need to know everything, I said, my voice steady now. Why now? Why come to me now? After everything. Dad paused. The guilt in his eyes was too much to ignore. Because I found something tonight. After you left, I went to the kitchen. I was looking for matches for the candles. And that's when I found it. That letter. Hidden in a drawer. I shook my head. They buried it. He nodded. Dorene knew what it would do to you. She knew it would destroy the little control she had left. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the snow falling around us, cold and relentless. But something had shifted inside me, something that hadn't been there before. And then Dad spoke again, his voice low but firm. "I'm coming to get you. Let's go back and face them. Face the truth." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but it wasn't relief, it was a kind of resolve. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I wasn't going to walk away this time. I didn't answer right away, but I knew what I had to do. I turned and walked toward the car, gripping the letter in my hand. The world around me was quiet, too quiet. But it wasn't for long. The car ride back to my parents' house was silent. I could feel the tension in the air between Dad and me. But it wasn't just the silence of not knowing what to say. It was something deeper. The unspoken words between us had been piling up for years. And now, as we drove through the winding streets, the world outside a blur of winter white, I couldn't ignore the fact that everything had led up to this moment. I was no longer the kid who used to dread the family gatherings. I wasn't the young man who thought he had to prove himself just to belong. No. Now I was someone different, someone who had realized the truth about how far they were willing to push me, how much I had been forced to take for the sake of keeping the peace. And that peace was nothing but a facade, a lie that I was no longer willing to live with. Dad kept his hands tight on the steering wheel, his knuckles pale against the darkness of the night. His eyes kept flicking to me, as if expecting some kind of outburst, but I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about reclaiming my place, even if that meant confronting the ones who'd made me feel like an outsider in my own life. The house came into view, the warm golden glow of the lights spilling through the windows. It was the same house where we used to gather, where Mom used to laugh with us over games and stories. But now, as I stared at it, it felt less like home and more like a set stage, a place where the actors played their roles, but no one was ever really seen. We pulled into the driveway, and I could see the soft outline of Aunt Dorene's car parked near the curb. I could feel my pulse quicken, the weight of what was about to happen settling heavy on my chest. I wasn't going in as the child anymore. I wasn't the son or the brother trying to make everything work. No, I was the one who was going to expose the truth, the one who would finally take a stand and show them that I wasn't invisible. Dad parked the car, and before I could even unbuckle my seatbelt, he looked over at me, his face pale, almost apologetic. "Please, Ryan, just hear them out. They don't know how to apologize." "Do they?" I said, my voice cold but calm. I didn't even recognize the person who had spoken those words. The anger had been replaced with something more potent and unsettling calm, a quiet confidence that I had never felt before. He didn't answer me. There was nothing left to say. He just nodded and opened his door, stepping out into the cold. The snow crunched under his boots, and for a moment, everything was silent again. Even the car seemed to hold its breath. I sat there for a few seconds longer, staring at the front door of the house, the same house I had walked into 100 times before, the same house where laughter used to echo in the halls. But now, it was just a house, a place that held memories but no longer belonged to me. I opened my door and stepped out, my boots crunching in the snow. I could feel the cold seeping through my sweater, but it didn't matter. I had made up my mind. There was no turning back now. Dad had already reached the front door by the time I caught up to him, and as he opened it, the warmth from inside rushed out, like a reminder of everything that used to be. But there was no warmth in the people waiting inside. I could feel their eyes on me the moment I stepped inside. The way the room seemed to pause, just waiting for something to break the silence. Aunt Dorene stood in the hallway, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her eyes were narrowed, and there was no trace of the woman I once thought of as family. No more fake smiles or passive-aggressive comments, just cold, cutting disdain. Melanie was sitting at the table, her face flushed, her eyes darting between me and Dad. There was nothing resembling a welcome in her gaze. Uncle Joe sat at the end of the table, a half-empty glass of wine in front of him, and he didn't even bother to look up when I entered. The silence was suffocating. I walked past Aunt Dorene without a word, without a single glance. It wasn't worth it. I wasn't here to make small talk. I wasn't here to beg for acceptance. I was here to dismantle the lies. "What's this?" Aunt Dorene's voice cut through the quiet, but there was no venom in her tone, just a forced coolness. A family reunion? Or are you just here to cause more drama? I didn't answer her. Instead, I walked to the middle of the room, taking a slow, deliberate look around at everyone. Melanie was staring at her plate, her fingers twisting a napkin nervously. Uncle Joe took another sip of wine, trying to act indifferent, but his eyes were flickering toward me, measuring me, waiting for something. Dad stood just behind me, his expression unreadable. I pulled the letter from my pocket. The paper was folded neatly, but my fingers were shaking slightly as I held it up. The room fell even quieter as everyone's attention snapped to it. I could feel their eyes on the letter, on me, and I knew they were all thinking the same thing. What was this? What was I doing? This, I said slowly, holding the letter higher, is what you all tried to hide from me. Aunt Dorene moved forward slightly, her lips curling into a tight line. That's private. Ryan, you shouldn't. No, I interrupted, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. This is my family's truth, and you didn't want me to know it. I turned the letter toward them, and for a moment, no one spoke. Melanie's eyes flickered nervously between the paper and me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Uncle Joe finally put his glass down, his face turning pale, but it wasn't him I was here to confront. I looked directly at Dorene. You had no right to keep this from me, no right to hide my mother's final words, her last wish for me. You knew what it would do. You knew it would shatter your precious control, and that's why you did it, to keep me in the shadows, to keep me small. Aunt Dorene flinched, her grip tightening around her wine glass. That's not what this is about. I didn't let her finish. No, it's about power, about control, and I'm done. I'm done letting you manipulate everyone, done letting you turn my family against me. I turned to Melanie, who had stayed silent up until now, but I knew her well enough to see the guilt creeping into her eyes. You let her do this. You stood by while Dorene decided who I was. You let her push me away when I needed you most. And for what? To keep up appearances, to make sure you stayed the golden child. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her face flushed, her eyes darting to Dad for help, but Dad didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching, waiting, as if he knew this moment was inevitable. Aunt Dorene finally broke the silence, stepping forward, her eyes narrowing. You think you can come in here and throw around accusations? This is family. Ryan. Family, I repeated, my voice rising. This is what family has become, a place where the truth is buried and the loudest voices get to rewrite everything. No, not anymore. I walked toward the table, my eyes never leaving theirs. I'm not here for reconciliation. I'm here to set the record straight. And for once, you're all going to hear me. Melanie opened her mouth to speak, but this time I was done listening. No, I cut her off again, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I don't need to hear your excuses anymore. I've heard them all my life. And look where it's gotten me. With that, I placed the letter on the table. The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Read it, I said, my voice quieter now, but steady. Read it, and know this mom was never the problem. It was all of you. The days that followed felt like an emotional cleanse. The silence after the storm wasn't just calm, it was peace. My phone, which had once been bombarded with desperate pleas, was quiet, for the first time in over a decade. I wasn't waiting for a crisis to erupt, for another round of accusations, or for my family to expect me to fill a role I no longer wanted to play. It was like I had been holding my breath for years, and now I was finally exhaling, but there was still more to come. After I withdrew my name from the wedding payments and froze everything in their lives, the real consequences began to unfold. They weren't prepared for this. None of them were. Jason's calls became more frequent. He was drowning in the mess he had created, and his panic was palpable in every word he spoke. I don't know what to do. Adam, you have to help me. He pleaded over the phone. His voice cracked. The bravado he'd once had all but vanished. The gym's failing. The creditors are calling. Ava. She's mad. I don't know how to fix this. Just please. I cut him off. You never understood, did you, Jason? You thought I was just some emergency fund, some endless ATM? You never learned how to stand on your own 2 feet because you always knew I would pick up the pieces. Well, not anymore. You want help? Start by owning your mistakes. Start by learning what it means to be accountable. I'm done cleaning up your mess. The line went silent for a long moment, and then Jason finally spoke. "I'm sorry, man. I really am. I screwed up. I didn't know how to do this without you." It was the first time in years that I had heard Jason admit to failure. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for change, and that would come at a price. The $40,000 loan he still owed me, it wasn't just going to disappear. There would be no more second chances, no more empty promises. He was going to pay it back, one way or another. The next day, I received a call from the venue coordinator. She was polite, almost too polite, as she asked if I had reconsidered the wedding bill. "I'm afraid there's still a pending balance," she said. "We've tried to contact the parties responsible for the payment, but we've had no success. Can you confirm when we should expect the payment?" I almost felt bad for her. She had no idea what had gone down. "No, I'm afraid you'll need to take it up with the couple directly," I said flatly, my voice calm and controlled. The money I provided was never meant to be used for any of their personal indulgences. "I'm no longer responsible for this." I hung up the phone with a strange sense of satisfaction. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one carrying the weight. I wasn't the one scrambling to fix everything. The burden was theirs now, and they were going to have to deal with it. That evening, as I sat down to a quiet dinner by myself, I couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of relief. I'd done it. I had finally put my foot down, and it felt like a weight lifting off my chest. For years, I had played the role of the good son, the one who always said yes, always helped, always made sacrifices without a second thought. But that part of me was gone, and in its place was someone who was finally taking control of his life. But that wasn't the end of it. My parents hadn't given up yet. The next morning, I received a voicemail from my mom. Her voice was weak, trembling. "Adam, please, can we talk? This is all getting out of hand. Your dad is so upset, and this is tearing us apart. I know we've made mistakes, but you're breaking our hearts. Please, can't you just let it go?" It hit me then. The realization that my parents, my mother, in particular, had no real understanding of what they had done. They didn't see it. They didn't see how they had manipulated me, how they had taken advantage of my generosity, and how they had treated me as nothing more than a cash machine with legs. They thought I was just upset, just going through a phase. But this wasn't a phase. This was me finally standing up for myself. I deleted the voicemail without responding. There was nothing left to say. I had given them everything, and they had turned it into a weapon. I wasn't going to let them continue to hold power over me. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from my dad. "Oh, you'll regret this. Adam, you've broken everything. This is a betrayal. You'll see." I almost laughed when I saw it. He wasn't angry because I had stopped helping them. He was angry because I had exposed their manipulation. He was angry because the perfect family facade they had worked so hard to build was crumbling. And he was angry because I had taken control of my own life. Instead of responding, I printed out the message. It was a reminder that I had made the right choice. I wasn't the one betraying anyone. I wasn't the one who had used and discarded my family. They had done that to me. And now, I was finally letting go. Over the next week, I watched as everything I had set in motion unfolded. Jason's gym, which he had once been so sure would succeed, was on the verge of collapse. Ava had left him, apparently tired of the lies and the mounting debts. My parents, they had to move again, this time into a small rental, something they could barely afford. The house I had purchased for them had been returned to me, and I had it placed into a trust, cutting them out completely. It was the final blow to their carefully crafted illusion of control. I didn't feel any joy in their downfall, though, not really. I had spent years sacrificing my own well-being to support them, but at what cost I had lost myself in the process. The only satisfaction I felt was the peace of knowing I had finally reclaimed my life. I had let go of the people who had kept me in their shadow for far too long. And as the months went by, things began to change for me. I started traveling again, something I had put off for years. I started reading books I had always wanted to get to, but never had the time for. I laughed more, slept better, and woke up without the constant anxiety that had once defined my days. I had no more demands, no more expectations weighing me down. For the first time in years, I was living for me. Jason called once or twice after everything had settled down, but I didn't answer. I was done. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. He wasn't the only one who needed to change. I had finally realized that the only way to move forward was to leave behind the people who had never truly valued me for who I was, but only for what I could give them. In the end, I wasn't just free from them, I was free to be myself, to chase my own dreams, to build my own life, and to stop letting anyone dictate my worth. My family, once the center of my universe, had shown me their true colors, and now I was free to choose my own path. The past few months had taught me one undeniable lesson. Family isn't about blood. It's about love, respect, and mutual support. And I had found that in the people who had been by my side all along, the friends, the colleagues, the ones who had never asked for anything in return, but gave me their loyalty and trust story. 2. My name's Tom. I'm 34, and for as long as I can remember, I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one everyone turned to when things went wrong. Not because I was asked to, but because I thought if I kept helping, if I kept giving, maybe one day they would see me as more than just a source of cash. I'd spent years filling in the gaps for them, paying bills, fixing things, covering for them, and I convinced myself it was just temporary, that eventually, once their lives were more stable, they'd treat me differently. They'd finally appreciate me. Spoiler, they didn't. Now, don't get me wrong, my family isn't toxic in the usual ways. They didn't yell or throw things. Their selfishness was quieter, subtler. It was in the way they expected things from me, without ever really asking. The way they treated me like an ATM. And somehow, it always felt like the more I gave, the less they saw me, until the only time they called was when they needed something. I'll admit I was naive. I thought that if I just kept giving, kept sacrificing, eventually they'd see me. Not as a bank, not as the one who picks up the pieces, but as family. And maybe I could have continued like this forever, endlessly providing, with the faint hope that one day it would matter. But then came my birthday. I was turning 34, and for once, I was determined to make it special. I booked a table at a nice restaurant, nothing extravagant, just somewhere we could all sit down and have a decent meal. No expectations of gifts, no surprise parties, just a simple dinner. I wanted to feel like more than a wallet. Maybe this year would be different. I even offered to pay. All I wanted was to spend time with my family, just once, without feeling like the spare tire. I told everyone well in advance. The response lukewarm, at best. My mom said, "We'll see, things are tight this week." My dad muttered, "I don't know if I can make it." And my brother, he barely looked up from his phone. I didn't push, I just nodded, smiling through the familiar sting. Another birthday, another disappointment, but I still held on to that fragile hope. Maybe this time it would be different. Maybe they'd surprise me. Then, 2 days before my birthday, my cousin called. "Hey, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I went to see your parents yesterday." He started, his voice sounding a little off. Okay, what's going on?" I asked, already sensing something was wrong. "They're planning a trip. Just the two of them," he said. "Some kind of getaway water park, jacuzzi, nice hotel." My stomach twisted. "Are you serious?" "Yeah," he said. "And your mom?" She laughed and said, "Let him celebrate his birthday alone. We're not wasting money on that." I sat there in stunned silence for a moment, trying to process what I was hearing. "Thanks for telling me," I said finally, my voice flat. "I appreciate it." I ended the call. And I didn't feel angry. Not yet. But the clarity hit me like a punch to the gut. All these years, I thought I was buying love, buying respect, and here it was proof that I wasn't even worth a birthday dinner. I was disposable. So I did something I'd never done before. I logged into our joint account, the one I had opened for the family, the one I had funded for years. I emptied it, every last cent. 3 days later, all hell broke loose. The morning after my birthday, my phone started blowing up. I wasn't even surprised, but the speed at which the messages poured in caught me off guard. First, missed calls from my mom, then my dad, my brother, my sister. Text after text flooded in. "Mom, Tom, call me right now. Dad, where's the money? Did you close the account? Dude, what the hell? Tom, what is wrong with you?" I ignored it all. I was still in bed, nursing a bit of a hangover from the dinner I'd actually enjoyed. My cousin had come through for me, showing up with some good friends. And we spent the night laughing, eating, and talking without the drama. It was the first time in a long time I'd actually felt like I was celebrating for me. Not because I had to. Then my phone rang again. I sighed and finally answered. It was my mom. "Tom, what have you been doing?" she asked, her voice already tight. "Good morning to you, too," I said, stretching as though nothing was wrong. "Don't play dumb. Where is the money?" "Oh, that. Yes, I closed it," I said, trying to sound casual. There was silence on the other end before I heard her intake of breath. "You had no right. That money was for the family." I almost laughed. "For the family? You mean the family vacation you were planning without me?" She didn't answer right away, but I could hear her breathing sharply. "Who told you that?" she finally asked, her tone defensive. I snorted. "Does it really matter?" "Tom, we were going to tell you. We just—" She trailed off, clearly realizing she had no explanation that wouldn't make everything worse. "We just needed a break." I laughed. "A break for years. I've been helping out. I've been there for every emergency, every problem, every excuse, and when it's my turn, I get nothing." "You're overreacting," she said, trying to brush me off. "No," I said, my voice colder. "You're the one who's overreacting. You've been using me for years. The moment I'm not useful, you ditch me." She paused, but before she could speak, I hung up. For the first time in a long time, I felt good. But the good feelings didn't last long. 20 minutes later, there was a loud knock on my door. I walked over, peered through the peephole, and saw my dad standing there. I opened the door just a crack. "What's up?" He pushed the door open, barging in. "Where's the money?" "Tom," I was caught off guard. "Are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious," he snapped. "We need it for the trip." I crossed my arms. "For the vacation you didn't invite me on." His face went red. "That's our money." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny, I don't remember you contributing." He clenched his jaw, looking furious. "You need to fix this now." Or what I asked, a calmness settling over me that I hadn't felt in years. He didn't answer. He just glared at me, expecting me to cave. I didn't. "Get out of my apartment, Dad!" He pointed at me, his face twisted in anger. "This isn't over." I smiled. "I know, and that's the best part." As he stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I locked it and sat down on the couch, my heart still racing. Then my phone rang again. This time from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello? Hi, is this Tom?" A deep voice on the other end. "This is Officer Reynolds from the local police department. We need to talk to you about a theft report filed by your parents." I almost laughed out loud. "A theft report? Are you serious?" The officer went on, explaining that my parents had reported me for stealing from the family account and they needed to discuss the matter. I calmly explained that I had opened the account, funded it, and closed it. There was no theft involved. After a brief pause, the officer admitted they had no proof my parents had contributed to the account. He assured me the case would be closed unless they could provide evidence. I hung up, feeling a strange sense of amusement. The next morning, I woke up feeling surprisingly calm, almost too calm, considering everything that had just happened. My dad had stormed in, demanding the money I had taken from the joint account, and my mom was trying to guilt-trip me over the phone, as if she hadn't spent years treating me like a walking ATM. But somehow, I was okay. Maybe because for once, I had taken control. For once, I wasn't the one apologizing, the one fixing everything. I made myself a coffee, sat down on my balcony, and looked out at the city as the sun rose. There was still a bit of residual anger. How could there not be? But it wasn't the searing kind I'd been used to for years. This felt different. It felt like freedom. Then, just as I was starting to relax, my phone rang again. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I hesitated for a second, then answered, "Hello, Tom. This is Officer Reynolds from the local police department." The deep voice on the other end said, "We need to talk to you about a theft report filed by your parents." I froze. Seriously, I had just gotten off the phone with the officer the day before, and now they were filing a formal report that was a new low, even for them. I could feel my patience starting to fray. "A theft report? You're kidding, right?" The officer continued, his tone professional but not entirely convincing. "Your parents claim that you withdrew all the money from the family account without their permission. They want to discuss the matter." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I opened the account. I funded it. I closed it. There's no theft here. He hesitated before responding, well, without proof that they contributed to the account, this is going to be a difficult case for them to pursue. I'll need to close the matter unless they can provide something concrete. I couldn't help but laugh. The audacity. My parents were going to try to accuse me of stealing when they hadn't contributed a single penny to the account in years. I understand. I said, still chuckling, thanks for letting me know. And please, close it. There's nothing to see here. I hung up, a little amused at how far they were willing to go. I knew it wouldn't stop there. But for now, the police wouldn't be a threat. What did worry me was how far they were willing to go to manipulate everyone around them. And that's when I got the message that made everything much, much worse. Later that afternoon, my phone lit up again. This time with a text from my cousin. I could tell something was up from the urgency in his tone. Dude, you're not going to believe this, but your parents used your old credit card to book the trip. They used your information to book the hotel. Tom, my stomach dropped. I'd never given them permission to use my card again. The last time I'd even seen that card was years ago, when I'd handed it over for an emergency. Like an idiot. I knew they had it, but I hadn't thought twice about it, and now they were using it to book a trip to a high-end resort under my name. My cousin wasn't done yet. And get this, they booked not one room, but two. A suite. They went all out. Man, they think you won't notice, but they're using your money for their little getaway while you're left holding the bag. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. This was a new level of betrayal. It wasn't just selfishness anymore. It was fraud. They hadn't even asked if I was okay with it. They didn't even try to pretend like they were doing this for me. They were just stealing from me. Plain and simple. I immediately opened my banking app. Sure enough, I saw a pending transaction, a large charge for a luxury hotel booking. I stared at it, feeling my pulse race. The worst part? It wasn't even for an emergency. It wasn't a last-minute thing like they always claimed. They were just doing what they always did, using me for convenience, for whatever they wanted, with no regard for me as a person. I called my bank right away, explaining the situation. The representative was sympathetic, but I wasn't looking for sympathy. I needed action. They've got my old card information. I told them, I want to block the transaction and get a new card. The representative was quick to reassure me, we'll block the transaction and issue you a new card. Let me check if there's a way we can reverse the charge. A few minutes later, she returned with good news. The charge was made at a resort a few hours away from you, and we've canceled it. We're also going to issue a refund for the amount. I hung up, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just the money I was getting back, it was the principle. They thought they could just do whatever they wanted, with no consequences, and now there were consequences. But I wasn't done yet. I waited until I was sure they were at the hotel, checked in and smug, before I made my next move. I called my cousin. You want to take a little trip, I asked, a grin spreading across my face. He agreed, but I didn't tell him everything, just enough for him to know that my parents were in for a wake-up call, and I wasn't done yet. An hour later, we were on our way to the resort. The whole drive, I kept thinking about how far they had crossed the line. Fraud, using my card without my permission, taking advantage of me in ways I couldn't even begin to process. They had gone from being selfish to outright criminal. And when we arrived at the resort, I headed straight to the front desk, keeping my tone calm and collected. Hi, I said to the receptionist, I'm looking for the reservation under my name. Tom Fisher. She looked at me, her fingers tapping the keyboard. Oh, yes, we have a reservation for you. However, it seems the booking was just canceled. I froze. My heart raced. I wasn't sure if I should feel angry, smug, or vindicated. They arrived about an hour ago. The receptionist continued. They caused a scene, demanding that we reinstate the reservation. When we couldn't, they tried to book another room, but their cards were declined. I couldn't help myself. A low laugh escaped my throat. This was it. The moment they realized they had gone too far. Where are they now? I asked, leaning in a little. They left about 30 minutes ago, she said. They were pretty upset. I felt a sick satisfaction as I turned to my cousin. He was grinning from ear to ear, clearly enjoying the spectacle from a distance. We walked away from the desk, and I headed for the elevator. I think we'll take a room here, I said, and I'll be paying with my money this time. We checked in, and I made sure everything was top-notch. I wasn't doing this to show off, I was doing it to take back what they'd tried to steal from me. I wasn't going to let them ruin my life anymore. That night, my cousin and I sat by the hot tub, sipping drinks, soaking in the view. I knew the real storm wasn't over. They'd come after me harder than ever. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't the one who had to hide anymore. This was my life now, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. The next morning, as expected, my phone exploded again. Missed calls, texts, rants from my parents, my brother accusing me of ruining everything, my sister calling me names. Mom, what have you done, Dad? You're a selfish, ungrateful brat. Tom, fix this now. You're such an expletive. I chuckled to myself, scrolling through the messages while sipping my coffee by the pool. But just when I thought things were getting quiet again, another message popped up on my screen. Mom, we're coming to see you. That was unexpected. I figured they'd go home, sulk, and come up with some new way to guilt-trip me. But no, they were coming to the resort. I sat there for a moment, considering my options. I could check out early and avoid the confrontation, or I could face them head-on. I chose option 2. 2 hours later, I saw them. My mom, my dad, and my siblings charging at me like a herd of angry cattle. People around us started staring as they approached, their voices rising before they even got close. What the hell? Tom, my dad, barked. I took a deep breath and pushed my sunglasses down, looking him dead in the eye. What's the matter? You drove here yourself. You canceled our hotel, my mom shrieked. We had nowhere to go. I shrugged. Not my problem. My brother shook his head in disbelief. You really don't see how messed up this is? Oh, I see it. I see it perfectly. I said, sitting up now, you used my card to book a trip for yourselves. And when that didn't work out, you blamed me. I watched them. The 3 of them stood in front of me. My mom, red-faced and furious, my dad seething with anger, and my brother, looking like I'd just betrayed the family by not coming to their rescue once again. And my sister, she was glaring at me from the sidelines, arms crossed, as if I had committed the ultimate crime. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. The mask of family love had been completely stripped away, and now all I saw was entitlement. They all wanted something from me. I couldn't help but feel a little detached from it all. Not because I didn't care, but because for once, I felt free, no longer chained to their demands, no longer held hostage by their emotional blackmail. It was a strange feeling, like walking out of a prison and feeling the sunlight on your skin for the first time in years. Seriously, Tom, what the hell? You're just going to leave us stranded like this, my dad snapped, his voice hard. I tipped my sunglasses down, meeting his gaze. Stranded, pretty sure you drove here yourself. Don't be a smartass, he muttered, his face turning darker with every second. You ruined everything. This is not how a family acts. I shook my head, finally standing up. The conversation had been going in circles long enough. It was time to finish it. Family isn't about using people for everything they've got. Dad, it's not about taking and taking, then acting shocked when the person you're using finally stands up for themselves. My mom's eyes widened in disbelief, and I could see the shock on her face. She had never heard me speak this plainly, this honestly, for years. I'd played along, giving in to their demands, keeping the peace, doing what I thought a good son should do, but not anymore. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. You had plenty of chances to treat me like a son, to show me you cared. You chose not to. And now that I've stopped playing along, you're angry. I let out a bitter laugh. You've treated me like an ATM for years. You don't get to be shocked when I stop paying. My dad glared at me, his face beet red. This is not how a family treats each other. I met his gaze without flinching. No, this is exactly how family treats each other when they only care about what you can give them. I've spent my whole life being used. Dad, I'm done. The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to figure out how to manipulate me back into the fold. But it wasn't going to work. Not this time. For the first time in years, I was standing my ground. And then, like a switch flipping, my dad muttered something under his breath, something I didn't catch, but it was enough to know he was done arguing. With a huff, he turned around, storming off toward the parking lot. My mom and brother followed, without so much as a second glance in my direction. It was over. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel the need to apologize, to explain myself, to justify my actions. I'd taken back my power. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The guilt trips and manipulations had stopped. My phone sat on the table, silent, no texts, no calls. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a message, a demand, or an emergency. It was strange at first, like the absence of their presence created a hole I wasn't sure how to fill. But as the hours passed, I started to breathe easier. My time was my own again. My money was mine. My life was mine. And for the first time, I didn't feel obligated to explain myself to anyone. By the time my cousin showed up to the poolside, I was already feeling the weight of the last few days lifting off my shoulders. He sat down beside me, a drink in hand, and handed it to me without a word. He had witnessed everything, the confrontation I had with my own family, the final straw. "That went well," he said, his voice light, but his eyes not missing a beat. "You really laid it out for them." I shook my head, chuckling softly. "Yeah, I guess I did. I've never said that much to them in my life." He leaned back in his chair, watching the water ripple in the pool. "Well, it's about time. You've been their punching bag for years, man. Someone had to stand up." I didn't answer immediately. I was still processing everything, the phone calls, the manipulation, the way they had tried to turn the tables on me, how they had accused me of stealing, of betraying them, when in reality, they were the ones who had crossed every boundary. But even more than that, I was processing the relief I felt, the feeling of finally being free. "Do you think they'll come back?" I asked, my voice low. He didn't hesitate. "No, not unless they've got something to take from you. And if they do, they'll try to play the victim again. But this time, I think you've got them figured out." I looked at him and nodded. He was right. They had always treated me like a resource, only reaching out when they needed something. I had been the safety net, the one they relied on without ever asking how I felt, or if I needed anything in return. But now, I was out of their web. I wasn't their backup anymore. I wasn't their ATM. And that realization felt more like a victory than anything. The next few days were quieter than I expected. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, another call, another guilt trip, something, but it never came. Not from my parents, not from my siblings. A week passed, then two. By the third week, I realized they weren't going to reach out. They were done with me. I was no longer useful to them, so they had written me off. And as painful as that realization should have been, it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. In fact, it was almost a relief. I had been used and discarded for so long that the absence of their demands actually felt peaceful. I had my life back. A few months later, I got a call from my cousin. I could hear him trying to hold back laughter, his voice practically bubbling with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," he said, barely containing his amusement. "What happened?" I asked, already suspicious. He was in too good a mood. Your parents, they got scammed." I froze. "What?" "Yeah," he said, laughing. "They fell for one of those get-rich-quick schemes. You know, the ones where some scam artist promises to double their money if they send a deposit first. They sent like $5,000 to the guy." I was speechless. The irony was not lost on me. These were the same people who had accused me of stealing, who had refused to show up for my birthday, and who had used me for everything they could. And now they had fallen for a scam. "Wait," I said, still trying to process. "They had $5,000 to throw away, but couldn't even spend $50 to come to my birthday dinner." "Yup, pretty much," he said, laughing. "And get this, they even took out a loan to do it. A loan." I sat there, feeling a strange combination of amusement and disbelief. After everything I'd been through with them, after all the years of them treating me like a bank account, this was the karma they were getting. They'd been so obsessed with squeezing every cent out of me, and now they had willingly given away thousands to some internet scammer. I laughed, a full, unrestrained laugh, a cathartic laugh. I had been waiting for this moment, the moment when their manipulation came back to bite them. "I bet they wish they had access to my money now," I said, shaking my head. "Oh, they're freaking out, man. They tried to report it to the bank, but because they sent the money willingly, there's nothing anyone can do. Now they're in debt." I couldn't stop laughing. It was perfect. After everything they'd done to me, everything they'd put me through, this was how it ended. They had fallen for a scam because they thought they were too clever to ever be tricked. "You know," I said, grinning, "I don't think I'll be reaching out to them anytime soon." My cousin laughed with me, his voice full of approval. "Good call." And just like that, I realized something. I had spent years trying to earn their love, their respect, their acknowledgement, but it wasn't me they wanted. It was my money. And once they couldn't get it, they had moved on. They hadn't even tried to reach out to apologize, to make things right. They were just gone. Story 3. It all started like any other dinner in our house, a little awkward, a little tense, but nothing I couldn't handle. My dad, sitting at the head of the table, was grinning like he had the best secret to share. I couldn't remember the last time he'd looked this pleased, but I wasn't about to get my hopes up. Not with him, not with this family. He raised his glass, eyes gleaming, and in the kind of voice that told me he thought he was about to announce something life-changing. He said, "I've booked us a vacation, just for our family. Olivia, my dad's daughter with his new wife." Lisa laughed out loud, like she couldn't contain her excitement. It was the kind of laugh that made me feel like I wasn't even sitting at the table, like I was invisible. And that was when the knot in my stomach started to tighten. I had no idea what was coming, but I could feel it in the air. "This trip is going to be amazing," Olivia said, practically bouncing in her seat, already imagining herself in a bikini on some tropical beach, probably at my expense. Lisa, my stepmom, just sat there with a slight, unreadable smile on her face. I had no idea where her loyalties lay in this moment, but I wasn't going to get too comfortable. Lisa wasn't a villain. She wasn't a saint either. She mostly stayed neutral, a silent observer, letting Dad and Olivia lead, but there was something in the way she was watching Dad now that made me feel uneasy. I waited for Dad to finish his sentence, to finish what he had started to say, but I should have known better. I should have known that the moment he turned to me, it was already too late. "Well, just the three of us," he said, casually, almost as an afterthought, as if I were a minor detail. I sat there, frozen for a second. "The three of you?" "Yeah, Andrew," he said, looking at me like he had just remembered my name. "Olivia and I have been talking, and we just thought it'd be nice to have some family time. You know, without distractions." Something inside me clenched. "Without distractions," I repeated quietly. The silence that followed felt thick, suffocating. Everyone else at the table pretended to keep eating, but I knew they could feel it too. The weight of Dad's words had just shifted everything. "Dad, are you serious?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but my heart was pounding in my chest. The sound so loud I could almost hear it over the hum of the ceiling fan. Lisa didn't say anything. She simply put her fork down, set her glass aside, and then, in a move I never saw coming, she stood up. "I don't support this," she said quietly, but the words cut through the room like a knife. For a second, I thought I'd heard wrong. I looked around, and even Olivia's wide eyes didn't register at first. My dad stared at Lisa like she had spoken in a foreign language. His face, the one that had been so smug only moments ago, was now frozen in confusion. "Lisa, what are you talking about?" Dad finally managed. Lisa crossed her arms, and the room fell into a tense silence. It felt like everything around us had paused. Even Olivia, who had been practically vibrating with excitement, was still. It was the first time I had seen any kind of defiance from Lisa. Ever. "You didn't ask me about this," Lisa said, her voice calm, measured. "You talked to Olivia. You talked to Andrew like he didn't exist. But you didn't talk to me." Dad blinked, as if trying to process the sudden shift. "But—" "No," Lisa interrupted, her voice getting firmer. "If Andrew isn't going, I'm not going either." The words hung in the air. For the first time since I could remember, Lisa wasn't silently putting up with Dad's nonsense. She was fighting for me, and I knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same. Olivia's expression shifted from confusion to irritation, her lips curling into a frown. "Mom, what are you doing?" she said, looking between Dad and Lisa, as if this was some kind of twisted joke. Lisa's eyes never left my dad. She was unshaken, completely in control. "I'm saying that if Andrew isn't part of this trip, I'm not going either. You don't get to exclude him. Not like this. Not in front of me." Dad's face turned red. He opened his mouth to speak, but Lisa wasn't having it. Without skipping a beat, she grabbed the glass of wine in front of him and poured it straight onto his steak. The clink of glass against plate was so sharp, it made everyone jump. Olivia shot out of her chair. "Mom, what the hell is wrong with you?" Dad jumped back, his hand hovering over the ruined plate. His eyes were wide with shock, like he couldn't believe what just happened. "Are you insane?" he stammered. Lisa didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She stared at him, her voice eerily calm. "Andrew is part of this family, and if you can't handle that, maybe you should be the one staying home." For the first time in my life, I saw my dad's mask crack. His jaw tightened, but there was something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years: guilt. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, he understood exactly what he had done. Lisa didn't wait for him to respond. She turned to me, her voice soft but commanding. "Let's get out of here. Andrew, now." I couldn't move at first. I was still processing everything: Lisa standing up for me, Dad's shocked silence, Olivia's angry disbelief. This wasn't the family dinner I had expected. It wasn't the family dinner I had been prepared for. But Lisa didn't give me time to think. She grabbed her purse, her movements quick and sure. "Come on, Andrew," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We're leaving." I stood up slowly, the weight of the moment settling in. I didn't look at my dad or Olivia as we walked out. I couldn't. I didn't want to see their reactions, didn't want to be dragged back into their toxic mess, but I felt something change. Something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Lisa didn't say a word as she led me to the car. I glanced back at the house, watching the window for any signs of movement. Through the glass, I could see Dad sitting at the table, staring at the spot where his wine had splashed. Olivia was talking to him, her hands moving frantically as if trying to make sense of the situation. Lisa didn't stop. She just opened the car door, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. "Get in," she said, her voice steady, like she was already prepared for the fallout. I climbed into the passenger seat, buckled my seatbelt, and we drove away. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a choice. I had a voice, and it wasn't just Lisa who had given me that. It was her refusal to let my dad continue treating me like an outsider. She had made a stand, and now I was going to stand with her. We drove in silence for a while. I had no idea where we were going, but I didn't care. I didn't need to know. Lisa wasn't in a hurry. She drove slowly, almost like she was letting Dad stew in his own thoughts. I couldn't help myself. "What just happened?" I asked, breaking the silence. Lisa exhaled sharply, like she'd been waiting for me to ask. "Your dad crossed the line," she said simply. I let out a small laugh. "He's been crossing it for years." Lisa didn't argue, she just kept driving. Finally, she pulled into the parking lot of a small 24-hour diner just outside of town. The neon signs blinked on and off, casting an eerie glow on the few trucks parked outside. We sat there for a moment, neither of us moving, both of us just absorbing what had happened. Lisa finally turned to me, her face unreadable. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I shrugged, unsure of how to answer. "I don't know." Lisa nodded, like she understood. Then, she reached over, grabbed her phone, and turned it over, ignoring the buzz from the screen. "Your dad's panicking," she said. Setting it aside, I frowned. "Are you going back?" She looked at me, her eyes steady. "Not yet." The way she said it made something stir in me. I didn't know what Lisa was planning, but it was clear that this wasn't over. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. Whatever happened next, I had someone in my corner. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. She opened the car door. "Come on, let's eat." Lisa didn't say a word as we walked into the diner, her pace steady and purposeful. The bell above the door jingled softly, signaling our entrance, but neither of us paid it any mind. We slid into a booth in the back, the cracked vinyl groaning under our weight. The place smelled faintly of burnt coffee and stale grease, the kind of place you go when you don't care about the ambiance but just need a quiet corner to think. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel in this moment. Part of me wanted to scream in frustration everything had changed in the blink of an eye. But another part, the part that had been suffocated for so long by the constant weight of being ignored, excluded, treated like an afterthought, felt light, free, even. Lisa didn't speak at first, her fingers tapping lightly on the tabletop. She didn't seem in a hurry to order or say anything. She was just waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. She seemed completely in control, like she had everything figured out, while I was still trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. After a long pause, I cleared my throat. So, what just happened back there? I asked. Finally breaking the silence, Lisa exhaled sharply, like she had been holding her breath for longer than she was willing to admit. Your dad finally crossed the line, she said, her voice calm, matter of fact. I snorted. He's been crossing it for years. Lisa, this isn't new. He's been shutting me out, treating me like crap, making me feel like I don't belong. I leaned back in the booth, trying to make sense of the mess I'd just witnessed. But now, you've just humiliated him in front of Olivia. What does this mean? Are you really going to walk away from him over this? Lisa glanced at me, her eyes hard but not unkind. You think that's what this is about, walking away from him? She shook her head. No, Andrew, this isn't about me leaving him. This is about him realizing that I'm not going to just let him treat you like dirt anymore. I'm not going to let him control everything just because he thinks he can. I blinked. I had no idea where this was going. What do you mean, control everything? Lisa picked up her coffee, took a slow sip, and set it back down. Your dad's built his entire life around control. He wants Olivia to adore him, worship him. He wants me to be dependent on him, and he wants you to feel like you're nothing, like you don't matter. She glanced at me, her expression softening for a moment, but what neither of them realize is that he needs me more than I need him. The words hit me like a punch. Wait, what? Lisa leaned in slightly, her voice dropping lower as if she didn't want anyone else to hear. Your dad has been pretending to have it all together. He's the big man, the one in charge. But financially, he's a mess. The house, the vacations, all the crap he buys for Olivia. It's all on credit. He's drowning in debt, and I'm the only thing keeping him afloat. I stared at her, my mind racing. I had always known Dad liked to spend money on flashy things, especially when it came to Olivia. But I had never imagined it was this bad. He's been faking it. Lisa nodded. He's been living this lie, hoping no one will figure it out. And now, Andrew, now he's starting to realize that he's not in control anymore. Not like he thinks. I was silent for a long time, processing everything she had just laid out. It was hard to wrap my mind around the idea of Dad being weak, being desperate. For so long, I had seen him as the one in charge, the one who called the shots, who made the rules. But now, everything was crumbling. I wasn't sure how to feel. Angry, relieved, maybe a little bit of both. Lisa's phone buzzed on the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. She didn't look at it. Instead, she turned it over and pushed it aside as if it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. He's panicking, she said, her voice cool. Are you going back? I asked. My throat tight. I could hear the weight of the question hanging between us. Lisa didn't answer immediately. She tilted her head, thinking. Then she looked me in the eye and said, Not yet. The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. There was something in her tone, something dark and final, like she was planning something, but wasn't ready to show her cards just yet. Before I could ask more, the waitress came over, taking our orders in a quick, practiced manner. I barely heard what she said, too caught up in the mess that had just unfolded. Lisa placed her menu down and leaned back, crossing her arms over her chest, but her eyes never left me. She was waiting for something, waiting for me to get it. So, I began, trying to steer the conversation back to something more grounded. What's the plan, Lisa? What do you want to happen next? Lisa's eyes narrowed slightly, her lips curling into the faintest smile. I'm not sure I have a plan, Andrew, but I know this. Your father thinks he's still in control. He wants Olivia to adore him. He wants me to be dependent on him. And he wants you to feel like you're beneath him. But that's where he's wrong. I leaned forward, intrigued. How's he wrong? Lisa's eyes softened a little, but her voice stayed firm. You're not as alone as he wants you to believe. You're part of this family. And whether he likes it or not, I'm going to make sure he knows that. The words hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt like someone actually saw me, not just as some inconvenient part of the family, not as the afterthought in their happy little picture, but as someone who deserved respect. I had never been the center of attention in this house. For years, I had lived in the shadow of my dad's infatuation with Olivia, the princess who could do no wrong. But tonight something had shifted. Lisa wasn't just my dad's wife. She wasn't just the neutral figure who sat quietly at the table, letting him get away with whatever he wanted. No, tonight, she had shown me that she cared, really cared, and that she wasn't going to let him get away with treating me like I didn't matter. I didn't know exactly what Lisa had planned, but I knew one thing for sure: she wasn't just defending me. She was playing the game on her own terms now. And maybe, just maybe, she was going to win. The diner was quiet, except for the faint hum of the neon lights flickering above us. Lisa picked up her phone again, her fingers tapping lightly on the screen, but she didn't say a word. I was still processing everything. The realization that Lisa, my stepmom, had just become the only person who truly had my back. Then, just as I was about to ask her more, the door to the diner swung open, and in walked the last person I expected to see. Dad? He didn't see us at first. He was standing by the door, scanning the room like he was looking for someone. Then, his eyes landed on us. I saw the flash of recognition, followed by the immediate tension that crept into his posture. Lisa didn't flinch. She didn't even look up at him. She was still fiddling with her phone, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. But I could feel the weight of the moment. My dad, the man who had always controlled everything, was walking straight into Lisa's territory now, and I wasn't sure what would happen next. Dad walked straight to our booth, his face a mask of frustration. "We need to talk," he said, his voice sharp. Lisa didn't blink. "We're talking now, Daniel," she replied, her tone unshakable. Dad's face flushed slightly. He opened his mouth to argue but thought better of it. He exhaled loudly, running a hand through his hair. "Not here. Let's go home." "No," Lisa said, her voice direct, unwavering. "Not until you understand something." Dad's brow furrowed. "What's that?" Lisa leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking with his. "Andrew is part of this family. Daniel. You don't get to decide when he's important and when he's not. If you ever try to pull something like this again, if you ever try to shut him out like that, I'll leave. And you know exactly what that means." For the first time in as long as I could remember, I saw my dad falter. His jaw clenched, and he looked away, almost as if the weight of Lisa's words had physically hit him. He didn't argue. He didn't even try to justify himself. He just sat there, his shoulders slumped, staring at the table in front of him. He was the one who had always been in charge. But tonight, I saw my dad for what he was: desperate, afraid, and no longer in control. The silence between us was thick, almost suffocating. Dad sat there, his hands gripping the edge of the booth like it was the only thing holding him together. I could see the frustration in his eyes, but there was something else there too, something new, the pride he had always held so close, the belief that he was untouchable, was cracking. He was no longer the man who made the rules, who controlled everything in our house. Tonight, Lisa had taken that power from him, and I think he realized it, even if he didn't want to. Lisa didn't back down. She didn't flinch when Dad's eyes turned hard, or when he tried to play the same old manipulative games. She was calm, steady, like she had already won, and in a way, she had. "You need to get this through your head, Daniel," Lisa said, her voice cold but full of purpose. "Andrew is part of this family. You don't get to decide when he matters and when he doesn't. If you ever try to pull that stunt again, if you ever try to cut him out like that, I'm done. Do you understand me?" For the first time, I saw Dad's face crumple. He wasn't angry, he was defeated. The weight of Lisa's words hung in the air like a suffocating blanket. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and then just stared at the table, as if trying to find the right words, but knowing there were none left. It was the first time in years I had seen my dad actually unsure of himself. It was the first time I realized that, in a twisted way, Lisa had the power here, not him. She wasn't just controlling the situation, she was controlling him. "You're overreacting, Lisa," Dad muttered finally, but even his voice was lacking the usual bite. He looked at me for the first time, but there was no anger in his eyes, just something close to regret. "I didn't mean to make you feel excluded. I just thought—" "No," Lisa interrupted, her tone sharp, cutting him off. "You thought only about yourself. As always. You didn't think about Andrew, and you sure as hell didn't think about me." She stood up, her eyes never leaving Dad's face. "If you want me to stay, if you want this family to stay intact, you need to start showing Andrew the respect he deserves. Not when it's convenient for you. Not when Olivia's around, but all the time." Dad's face went pale, his fingers twitching as if he was about to reach for something, anything to regain control, but nothing worked. The pieces of the life he had carefully constructed around his power, his control, were slipping away. And he knew it. The tension was suffocating, but Lisa wasn't finished. She didn't give him the space to maneuver, to backpedal, like he usually did when things got tough. "You should go home, Daniel," Lisa said, her voice almost bored now, like this conversation wasn't worth her time anymore. "You've already lost. I'm not going to argue with you anymore. If you can't see what's right in front of you, then maybe this is where we end." Dad's shoulders slumped even further. I didn't know if he was about to explode or break down, but he didn't do either. Instead, he just stood up slowly, pushing the booth away with a resigned sigh. "I'll go home," he said, his voice barely audible. "But we'll talk later." Lisa didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. Dad had never been this quiet, this uncertain. I had never seen him this vulnerable before. He looked at me again, this time his gaze lingering, like he was trying to say something but didn't know how. I stared back at him, my heart a mixture of anger and something else, something I didn't expect. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him, almost. But then, I remembered everything. The years of being dismissed, the constant feeling that I wasn't good enough, the way he made sure Olivia always came first, even when it meant hurting me. That pity I had for him evaporated in an instant. "See you at home," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Dad didn't respond. He just walked out, the bell above the diner door chiming softly as he left. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some big confrontation. It was just him walking away, defeated, knowing he had no ground left to stand on. We sat there for a moment, the clinking of silverware and the soft hum of the diner filling the space between us. I wasn't sure what to say, or if there was anything left to say. Lisa had won. She had stood up for me when no one else ever did. When I had long given up on ever getting that kind of support from anyone in the house. She was quiet for a while, too, her fingers drumming lightly on the edge of her coffee cup. Finally, she spoke, but her voice was softer this time, more reflective. "I know you're confused," Lisa said, her gaze focused on the table. "This isn't how it's supposed to be, I get it. You've been stuck in the middle for too long, and now I'm pulling you into something you didn't ask for." I looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean I didn't ask for any of this?" She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "No, you didn't. But sometimes, you don't get to choose when things change. The world keeps spinning, whether you like it or not. And right now, this is the change you need." "I don't know if I'm ready for this," I admitted quietly. "I don't know how to be part of something like this. Like a real family." Lisa's eyes softened as she looked at me, her expression almost maternal. "You don't have to be ready, Andrew. Not all at once. You've had your whole life to feel like you don't belong. But now, I'm giving you the chance to see what it feels like when you do. Whether you're ready or not, you do belong here. And I'm not going to let anyone forget that." The way she said it made something stir inside me, a flicker of hope I hadn't felt in years. Maybe Lisa wasn't perfect, but she was the first person in my life to actually fight for me. Not because it was convenient, not because she had to, but because she chose to. The drive home was quiet. I didn't feel the usual tightness in my chest, the gnawing anxiety that came with the thought of facing Dad and Olivia. Instead, I felt calm. Maybe it was the relief of finally having someone in my corner. Maybe it was the feeling that, for once, I wasn't invisible. When we pulled into the driveway, the house was quiet. The lights were on inside, but no one was answering the door. I could see the faint outline of Dad's car parked in the driveway. He was home, probably stewing in his own thoughts, trying to figure out how to regain control. Lisa parked the car and looked at me, her eyes serious. "You ready for this?" I didn't know what she meant by this, but I nodded anyway. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could face whatever came next. Whatever my dad had to say, whatever Olivia would throw at me, I wasn't alone anymore. We walked in, and there they were, Dad and Olivia, sitting in the living room. The TV was off. Olivia was curled up on the couch, her arms crossed like she was trying to shrink herself into the cushions. Dad was sitting in his chair, staring at nothing. They both looked up when we walked in, but neither spoke. Lisa closed the door behind us and took her time putting down her purse. Then she turned to face them. And for the first time, I saw her as more than just my stepmom. She wasn't just someone in the background anymore. She was in control. "Let's get something straight," Lisa said, her voice low, firm. "This is not up for discussion. If you continue to treat Andrew like he doesn't matter, like he's not part of this family, there will be no more us, no wedding, no second chances, no more pretending." Dad swallowed hard. I could see his throat working, but he didn't say anything. Lisa turned to Olivia, her expression unwavering. "And you," she said, "if you keep treating Andrew like he's beneath you, if you keep acting like he's some extra piece of furniture in this house, you're going to have a very big problem." Olivia's face twisted, but she didn't argue. She shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "What does that mean?" Lisa didn't blink. "It means I'm the one who handles the finances in this house. You like your shopping sprees? Your vacations, all the extra money? That's all me." She paused, letting the words settle. "If I see one more ounce of disrespect from you, there will be no more money for any of it. You won't get another cent from me or your father.